Hey everybody, welcome back to the things we know. It's we Lisa and I record these on Thursdays, and it is my favorite day of the week. So yay.
Agreed.
So good to see you.
Yay.
And it's
Happy
only been a
Thursday.
couple weeks since we were together in person, so I feel giddy. Like, yay. Um, Today's episode we're calling Faith and Freedom.
Not as
Um,
giddy.
Not as giddy. And I wish it was a George Michael tribute. That would be
Me
really cool. We
too.
we could do that sometime. And like Freedom 90 would have been a like really solid opener, right? But that's not this. This conversation has been sitting with me for a while, and Lisa's been really cool letting me put it off until I wasn't at a high temperature about it.
High temperature. Yeah, you weren't an actual flame when you wanted to talk about it. I mean,
Yeah.
we'll see how this ends. But yes, I mean, it is one of those topics that, honestly, I think is personal and political all at once, right? It reaches into how you and I were both raised, how we've chosen to raise our children, how we live now. Sorry, your face is cracking me up.
Yeah.
Really? What? I mean, because we are oftentimes when we're discussing this stuff like human flames. Because it watching faith get used and twisted in public is making us crazy.
Yes. It's the weaponization of calling your opponent godless that
Mm.
is really, really getting to me. And so many times I thought, isn't that interesting that anything that's happening could either be called un-American or godless when so much of it, like for me or for you, is driven by the principles we were raised with.
Hmm.
And some of them were rooted in, for us in Catholicism and
Yeah.
Christianity. So it's bizarre. And we're not here with any answers. We're here with a lot of, frustration, disappointment, fear, sadness. So it isn't a sermon or a lecture. It is us kind of looking at this baffled, right? We're bewildered
Hmm.
by some of this and also just really worried. I would think I can speak for both of us. And
Yep.
we're trying to make sense of something that's really confusing and complicated, which shouldn't be, but it always has been since the beginning of time. Like faith and freedom are both powerful ideas and they're colliding in ways we can't ignore. And I would say, like, from the beginning of time, I remember, like, don't talk about religion or politics, which is like so funny because it is,
Or sex.
or sex. That's right. Because
Oh
it's
well.
like woven into every human's experience. And now the way it's being weaponized and probably fair to say on both sides sometimes, but like where I'm seeing it so much is by the current administration in power, where it's really scary.
Yeah.
Especially that. So like I just for some background, if you don't know this already, like I grew up, when I say very Catholic, that's probably a funny thing to say, right? But like, the reason I say very Catholic is like there are the Catholics who, and this is no judgment, there's just Catholics who are like people who identify as Catholic and they might go to mass on the holidays.
Right.
They're not super entrenched and they might like, nod to the Pope or whatever. But I would say the reason I say I grew up very Catholic is I went to Catholic schools. My dad, when he wasn't flying, would go to daily mass. My grandparents went to daily mass. Like all the people I'm from, a huge family. I'm one of 17 grandchildren on one side, one of 18 on the other. It's
Wow.
funny that I'm forgetting that count. And all Catholic, right? So like all the
Hmm.
sacraments, the music. My mom was incredibly involved as a volunteer in the church, like coordinating programs and family groups. And my parents' chosen family came through like that parish life that we had.
Hmm.
So it all shaped me, right? And then I had a Marine Corps father, right? So like the military Catholic ethos with which I was raised, and yes, totally a lot of privilege, a lot of cluelessness around that privilege. We don't need to get into all of that. I have said that before, and we will say it even more here later on another pod. But like I can my connection to it will always be there. Am I the most practicing Catholic in my family? Not even close. Um, but like there's a lot about it I still really love. I can walk into any cathedral and feel like a shift and a grounding and like a peace. because I did Jesuit volunteer corps after college, I really created my own adult relationship with spirituality, woven in with social justice, which is the Jesuit ethos. Um, and the community aspect of it, the community responsibility aspect, going to Santa Clara, your daughter's at Loyola, so and you have your own experience, which you're going to share in a second, but like all of that, it shapes me. The social justice message of Christianity, right, is a huge part of like how I was raised. So that's my background, and I will say more, but anyway, go ahead.
No, I mean, I would definitely, consider you very Catholic, and me growing up Catholic. I
uh,
also went to Catholic school all through high school. And while I did not think I would raise my kids Catholic, I did end up having them both baptized. They went to Catholic school when they were in Chicago. Um, but I identify very clearly as a recovering Catholic. And I mean that strictly from the sense of the patriarchal aspect of the church. I have never, ever, ever had problems with Jesus. I have problems with some of his followers. So that is, but to your point, I mean, yeah, God, I remember going into the last time I was in New York, which was 2021, going into St. Patrick's and immediately starting to cry, and so the things that I still love, and absolutely my ethos is based on the Jesus that I learned about, not the white Jesus, but the Jesus that did befriend lepers, and his best friend was we learned in theory a prostitute, and like all of that shit is like that's my bag, right?
right.
It's the other crap that I is why I consider myself a recovering Catholic. But when I am around a true practicing walk the walk, talk the talk Catholic, like our friend Sherry Turner,
Right. My
I
sister.
just
Yeah,
I
like
mean,
my sister-in-law. Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah,
know you have a
yeah.
ton. I have
Right.
only
No,
Sherry at
yes.
this point,
Right.
or my sister's mother-in-law is another one I would say. I love it. It makes me so
Yeah.
happy. It brings me back to all the things I did love as a small child, being in the Catholic Church. But I was very grateful. I mean, one of the things I guess at the time I was grateful for when my parents got divorced is my mom would have been sort of, I think, thought of herself as more Catholic, and she just getting divorced, she wouldn't go back to church, right? Like, and then she got
Yeah.
remarried, so she would have been completely what is it? Excommunicated. And I think that was part of it. That was part
That
of why I
wasn't a big
left.
word in the Catholic Church, though. I think it was a big word
Oh,
in other Christian denominations.
I
I didn't hear
mean,
it. I
oh,
just
you
heard
did in
like you
Ohio.
couldn't take communion or something like
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
I
yeah.
didn't.
No, you couldn't take communion if you were divorced, which is why she stopped going.
Right.
But you couldn't,
Right.
if you got remarried, you could get excommunicated. If you hadn't
Wow.
gotten your marriage, this is my memory of it. You could, unless she got her marriage annulled by the Pope, she couldn't get remarried, right? So I think those were the types of things that made me step away from the church. I was lucky enough to not have to go to church after about seventh grade, but then to watch her, like literally Charlotte and my niece Olivia, uh, same age, we made an active decision to go back to Ohio so that we went to Olivia's church so Charlotte could have her first communion.
Hmm.
They could do it together. Um, my mom wouldn't take communion that day.
Hmm.
That was her granddaughter's first communion, so she wouldn't take it, and I was just like, this makes no sense to me. So totally off topic, but
Get it.
that's where my recovering Catholicism comes in. But the teachings of the of what we learn, the teachings of Jesus, all in,
Right.
all
And,
in.
and I mean, I continue to grapple with so much of it because obviously there's the scandals in the church that are still playing out and still getting
Yes,
paid off. And we're seeing that so much now, like so much daily in other non-Catholic Christian churches, but it's been in the Catholic Church for decades. So
yeah,
there's a lot of things about like women in leadership and things like that that I have so many issues with. it doesn't mean I have less faith. It doesn't mean I'm a less devout person. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't
Right.
that mean that I don't pray. Like, I none of that defines me,
Mm-hmm.
because that's all man-made. The parts obviously that stayed with me were obviously the service and compassion. I do have a brother-in-law who's a Jesuit who like worked at the border for, over a decade, humanizing the deportation experience. He really educated us a lot, even before this administration, the first time, educated a lot about all the problems that have been going on at the border, gosh, since like our childhood, right?
Oh
So,
yeah.
um, anyway, so there's so many things that aren't just scandalous, that like where Catholics in the world are doing like such great work. But our whole focus here, right, is, this conversation is like whatever your relationship is, and it doesn't, like, ours just happens to be Catholic,
Right.
and there's a whole other conversation about how so many non-Catholic Christians don't even see Catholics as Christian. They think
Yep.
are completely evil, and that's interesting. And
It's kind
then
of my favorite part about being
I know
Catholic.
they did start playing well together on the issue of abortion, which we're also not
Mm.
totally getting into today, but that's a whole other topic. Like, there's so many Pandora's boxes here. But what's fascinating is seeing any of it weaponized, because one of the things that I also grew up with in my sense of patriotism is the commitment, like Thomas Jefferson's own words. I think, like, I saved it right here because we're gonna talk about a couple books, but about the separation of church and state, and the fact that this country was founded on the freedom, of religion, which needs to be based on the freedom from religion, right? Like, you
Right.
can't have freedom of religion without the freedom from religion. And we're watching play out right now this, like, a lot of people with a lot of power are like saying, no, we are a Christian nation, and there should be 10 commandments in the classroom, there should be Bibles in the classroom, and we're watching like what that's doing to the freedom of other people, of people who are Muslim or Jewish, or or any other religious practice, or if they just really don't want that, that, like, they opt out of that. So this is Thomas Jefferson's words in 1802, January 1st. I contemplate with sovereign reverence that act of the whole American people, which declared that their legislator should, quote, make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, thus building, end quote, thus building a wall of separation between church and state. It's so clear.
So clear.
And what's happening right now, and the whole point of this conversation that's been bubbling up for us, which is just a lot of you and I going back and forth today, so thank you for staying with us, is what the fuck?
Thanks for listening.
So,
I mean,
okay, right.
yeah,
So
go.
this book is called America's Best Idea. It's tiny. It's this tiny little book. I was supposed to hand it to Lisa, but I didn't finish it because I start a million books and then it takes me a long time to finish them. It's a problem. There's those two different hobbies, buying books and reading books. I'm trying to get through. It's such a good book, and it theoretically you could read it quickly if you weren't as scattered as me. But in this book by Randall Balmer, he lays out so clearly why the separation of church and state is, as he calls it, one of the best ideas America ever had. It wasn't about keeping faith out of public life. It was about creating space where all faiths could flourish, where no single belief system would control the state.
Amen. I mean, it's just that simple. And again, that's, as you said, that's something I do think, I'm not sure that people forget this, that the founders were trying to they weren't trying to erase religion. They were trying to protect it from being consumed by political power. I don't think people forget that. I just think the ones who are trying to misrepresent what this country was built on are so goddamn loud, and also they have control of everything right now.
And yet they're playing the victim. They keep saying they're being
They've been
persecuted.
playing the victim for, I mean, for as
I'm
long
probably
as I can
jumping
remember.
ahead on this outline that I have here, because that gets me so much, is this: you're playing the victim, that someone's coming after your religion with content that you don't have to watch,
Right.
or with celebrations of other religions that don't affect you.
Right.
All the national all your holidays are nationalized
Right.
and paid.
Mm-hmm.
And your churches are tax exempt. Not everyone else's is. So like, what the fuck?
I mean,
Anyway.
I was thinking that, when the weekend that we were at the retreat was, the tail end of some Jewish holidays. And I was like, it is so fascinating to me. That strikes me every year when I see all my friends who are Jewish celebrating, and wishing each other Happy New Year and such. I'm always like, isn't that just crazy ass that they don't get those, that is not also a national holiday. So in what country are we persecuting Christians? I don't live there.
When we worked at HCI and we were both doing masterminds, which for someone who doesn't understand what that is, like there was a time, there were so many seasons. There was a time when students who were enrolled in this graduate level work that they would get business coaching in a group setting, which was pretty cool. It's when Lisa
Yep.
and I met. And there was like a week it started, right? So there was
Mm-hmm.
like, it was a curriculum and there was a week, and it almost always started on the high Jewish holidays, like in the
Yeah.
fall. And
Yep.
I feel really dumb and silly that that had to be pointed out to me from a student. And then when I tried to advocate for it, they were like, well, we can't. And the students were like, we clearly aren't meeting during Christmas. We
Right.
clearly aren't meeting during that Easter week because we would be
Thanksgiving.
meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there was a lot of really important pushback that I don't even think got solved, if I recall. I don't think they did anything about that. The school I sent my kids to, the K-8, which was small, they ended up hearing a lot of parents and like not having the first day of school fall on those holidays, which I
Mm.
thought was really great. But before people understood it, they were really pissed off, right?
And
So
that's not
it's
that
just
long
such
ago.
an interest. No, we're
Yeah.
talking in the last, 5, 6 years, but with my kids it was a little longer ago, but still.
But don't
Point
you
being,
think that could be the fact that, I mean, I feel like all of this, the stuff that's happening now is stemming from the fact that we were becoming a better country. Still a shit ton of problems. You and I've talked about it. But
it
because
was
we were,
clunky, but
it was
awareness
clunky,
was
but we were,
happening.
awareness was happening. Things were changing, Indigenous
Now we've
Peoples
been
Day, Martin Luther King Day. Like, because of that, there's been this backlash, which is where we're at today and why we're talking about this.
right, and we didn't even get that far. Huh. Balmer
No, we
also
didn't.
talks about like this, how this wall of separation made it possible for the US to have more religious diversity almost than anywhere else, which is really important to remember, right? And that is always a point people bring up. More than anywhere else, we could, there are countries where it's really like hard to have any different religion, right?
Oh yeah.
He warns that the wall is being eroded in ways we have never seen before in modern history, and I'm
And
worried
we are
about that.
watching it happen day by day, moment by moment. It's just one more thing that is the heart of the United States is being eroded. It's not even just like an abstract debate anymore. If you are tapped in any way, shape, or form, this is true. It is being
Yeah,
eroded.
and you looking at Texas and Oklahoma, and Louisiana.
Mm,
Louisiana is another one. The Ten Commandments, the Bible, but also these tax exemptions or these like vouchers that are just
right.
eroding the public school system, so that you know people can send their kids to a Christian school, and Christian schools don't follow any sort of requirements that allow them to not discriminate against who they admit. So it's a really slippery slope, all under the name of Christianity, which should be welcoming, right? So
In
that's
theory, in theory, because it comes from the word Christ. But whatever. Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. It doesn't just affect non-Christians, really, right? It affects everyone. When the state starts defining religion, even Christians lose their freedom. Or even going back to what you just said, parents start using these vouchers to send kids to Christian school and they're not in a diverse community, as we've talked about before, diversity is so important in education, in life, in having not being in a bubble all the time. So this is, we're all losing our freedoms regardless of how we identify religiously or spiritually.
yeah, people don't see that. This is like, yeah. In every area, in health and like
Yeah.
safety with guns, if everything, everybody's losing.
Yep.
um So let's, yeah, I would say that's the one thing about that book I would really recommend too. When one interpretation of faith is written into law, other expressions get pushed aside. That's the one thing Balmer says over and over again, and that's totally not freedom. And this is
No.
like the freedom-loving party. So let's talk about what we're actually seeing, which is Christian nationalism. A lot of people would fairly call it white Christian nationalism.
Yep.
It's not all Christians, not even most at all, but it's the loudest, right? And it's a well-organized movement. It's been happening for decades, and I just wasn't aware of it.
Most people
It
weren't.
wasn't one of the things I knew. I wasn't super aware of it. But then when I look at it, I guess I kind of was. And as I've said here many times, I follow a lot of deconstructing, like very Christian, very devout people in their prayer life who have somehow, kind of deconstructed and pulled themselves out of high control religions where they suffered abuse, in really unspeakable ways, where they're like, oh, I was a pastor and I was actually purporting some of this until I really looked at it. Or people like we know who were very much plugged into it and part of it, and someone they love came out as gay or trans, or someone they love doesn't fit the mold, and they suddenly were like catapulted into the reality of, oh wait, this isn't matching at all the words of Christ. So I think what's happening is this move to a very strict interpretation of what it means to be Christian and how the country needs to also be this way goes into like ancient levels of misogyny and racism that are like now kind of woven into that whole umbrella of being Christian.
Yeah, and again, it is so dangerous, and not because of Christianity itself, but because they're using Christianity as a weapon of power. To your point, like this has been going on for a very, very long time, and it was very subtle and very slow moving up until Project 2025, and then it was just out there for all to see. And so many people turned their eye or believed that he knew nothing about it. And here we are. Mm.
There's so many directions I could go with this, because there's a very conservative wing of the Catholic Church, Opus Dei,
Yep.
but there's other really extreme Catholics that have kind of paired up with a lot of like the Heritage Foundation and Federalist Society, and a
Right.
lot of that. Like, nothing against conservatives finding each other when they felt lost and unheard and unseen, but when it like weaponizes Christianity that way with a lot of power and money, like
Yep.
it's pretty scary, and it's brought us back. Like, I mean, one of the loudest voices is a guy, Pastor Joel Webbin. He's so
Mm.
scary. There's another
Yep.
guy, Matt Walsh, but Joel has said women shouldn't vote, and they shouldn't even be in public life, right? That's what he
Mhm.
said. The 19th Amendment was a mistake, and they're here to be gentle supporters of men.
Is this the same guy that I saw the other day? I don't know if it's him or Doug Wilson out of Idaho, but I feel like it's this guy who basically said that women aren't being held accountable. Was it
Hmm.
this guy? It was a reel I saw recently. It was like the
Was he
problem
dark
is,
hair? Like dark hair?
yes.
Because there's two guys who I keep thinking are the same person, and they
Okay.
say equally offensive stuff. And one is Matt
Got
Walsh
it.
and one is Joel Webbin.
Okay.
Doug Wilson, I think, has lighter hair. He's a little heavier set, and
Mm. Oh
he's the
yes, I
one
know.
who's the pastor of Pete Hegseth's church. But
Yes, I'm familiar with who that guy
I
is.
kind of keep my eye on a lot of these guys, even though it's not fun. But just
It is
because
not
it's
fun.
frightening, the audience and the power they have.
Yeah, because again, this Doug Wilson out of Idaho, another Christian nationalist. Let's not just call them Christians. He is a
Mm.
Christian nationalist. And he also thinks only male heads of households should vote.
It's interesting that
Fuck
he says that, because
you.
I think he also did say his wife votes, but that he's like for that. And that's always so
Well,
interesting that,
but
like,
it kind of goes back to the trad wife thing, right? Like, I'm going to stay
yeah,
home and do everything, but I'm also going to be a big influencer on it. So pick a lane, people.
yeah,
Fucking
yeah. And
hell.
I think and it makes me really sad too to see those words amplified and praised by
Mm.
the Secretary of War. Um, because that's
Garbage
when you see
human.
the pipeline between Christian nationalist rhetoric and political power.
I mean, it's not a pipeline. It is a gushing hose at this stage of the game. Like there, first time around, there were still some smart people in the room, and now all we have in this regime is this Christian nationalist. Blah, that's when it stops being fringe, right? Because it is now very, again, unless you are completely putting your head in the sand, and I know there are people that are, and God is blessed to you. You have now heard of the term Christian nationalist. You now understand, or at least see what is happening, right?
Right.
Um, yeah, it's like they've given this very specific, very backwards, very back in time ideology a microphone.
So I want to call out a couple, like I'm seriously naming, people that I don't need to give a platform. So I want to say there are so many good ones out there.
Oh,
When Bishop Buddy, is it Buddy?
I am unclear. I don't know.
When she spoke to the new administration, appealing to their empathy for people who are scared and the people who take care of everybody and, who have less access to resources and rights. And then I mean, there's no other way to put it. The political spin on that was that she was spewing hate. And I was like, where is the
I
hate?
know.
Like, listen to it. She was literally like bringing words from the Bible. Like, in the Christian evangelical world, I've learned the term the red letters because in Bibles the red letters are Jesus's words in the gospel.
Huh.
So they're like, these are the red letters. And I was like, what does that mean? That sounds crazy. But now I get it. Like the red
Interesting.
letters are like if you're looking at certain publications, when it's Jesus's actual words, they're written in red ink. Interesting.
Interesting.
Um, I remember saying to you and to my sister and a lot of people, like, and my brother-in-law, who's, a Jesuit who's equally concerned about what's happening to the least of these, right? Like the people with the least amount of power, which was, why aren't the good Christians louder? Why are these really like seemingly woman hating, immigrant hating Christians with quotes, like, why are they so loud? And why? And like, I just was desperate. So in my search, it's probably how I came across like all these, the Tia Levings and the
Right.
Monty Mater and the April Ajoy. But so there's like this guy, Tim Whitaker, who started something called the New Evangelicals, and he does a podcast with April Ajoy called the Tim and April Show. There's this guy, Brian Recker, who just wrote a book called Hell Bent, and about how the way we raise children with this fear of hell and like the emotional abuse that causes keeps them from a loving relationship with Christ. There's this guy, Joe Smith, I think. Like there's some really good, beautifully comforting. There's a priest, Father David. I don't even know what his last name is. He's like Father David here. I
Seen
repost some
him.
of his
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
There are people, priests who show up at these peaceful protests who get shot in the head with a rubber
With a pepper
bullet,
ball.
or who
Yeah.
have shown up at immigration hearings and who have like caused some ICE people to step back, which should get you thinking.
But
So like, oh, sorry, go ahead.
well, I just was like, but I want to point out that these people that you're talking about, I mean, even the Pope, again, with as much stuff as we still have issues with the Catholic Church and leadership in particular, this Pope, like the one before him, really did, in my mind, walk the walk, right? Pope
Mm-hmm.
Leo is out there, and God bless Southside Chicago, right? Like he is out there
Duh, Pope.
speaking, he is the Pope. He is speaking the truth of what Jesus said around immigrants and so forth. Um, and so I just want to point out, you said we're naming a lot of people. I want to name the good ones. Well, the ones we're naming who are using and weaponizing Christianity for power are Christian nationalists. The ones who aren't are not Christian nationalists, right? Bishop,
Correct.
she was a Episcopalian. The priest that got shot in Chicago with a pepper ball was Presbyterian. Like
Right.
there are all, and then we've got the lay people too, like John Pavlovitz. I don't never know
Oh
how to
yeah, yeah,
say
yeah.
his name. Like there's a lot of lay, really Christian Catholic spiritual
Right.
people doing good things as well.
Right. And there's a lot, there are. And the ones who in particular grew up inside decades of, high control, like Christian nationalist type churches, none of them are surprised. They're actually surprised that we're surprised because
Yeah.
they grew up with their parents at their tables and in their churches and Sundays and Wednesdays and all the days they were there. This was the plan,
Right.
we're here we're seeing like horrible eugenics type of
Yep.
rhetoric out there right now. So like there's like this isn't just like, oh, we're overreacting or we're clutching our pearls. Like this is actually was laid out in Project 2025. This was
Yep.
something they heard about forever, and they get irritated when we act like, where did this come from? This
Right.
was the plan. So I think like what's happening here is so it's emotional for me, obviously, because it's like it doesn't make sense. It is so unkind and unchristian. And like when I think of the things we sang as kids, like they'll know we are Christians by our love, right? If like whatsoever you do to the least of my
I love
brothers and
that song.
sisters, that you do unto me, right? These are
Yep.
things that I remember, and like that drove, and like it's the way I watched my very humble grandparents walk their talk, right? And my
Hmm.
mom and dad too. So
Yeah.
it makes no sense to me that people who call themselves Christian are now part of this, like, oh, empathy is toxic. And I
Hmm.
actually watched this horrific woman, I don't even want to name her, but she's very popular. She wrote a book about the toxic empathy. She's doing like her rounds on those kind of, I don't know what you call them. You might know what they're called, those round tables where like people get to debate with her.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Like
And
what's his name did.
she
Yeah.
explained why empathy is toxic, because if you're sitting in front of somebody who is struggling with something sinful, like being gay or trans, and you start to feel for them, then you're affirming their sinful life. Like she really kind of just twists it in a way that gets people
Wow.
being like, okay, this is what God wants. And like Christian nationalism
Mm.
also has baked into it this idea that, and I've seen this a lot. I've read and watched a lot of documentaries, like on both sides of things, because I was so trained to do that. Don't get your source just from the things you agree with. And there's nobody denying that there are some of these really wealthy pastors who believe their wealth, even though they, soaked their followers, who probably gave up way too high of a percentage of their own income to be part of it. They really believe their wealth comes from being blessed. And people who struggle, and many of them have said, like in youth groups, were told that their friends who, or even family members who were in wheelchairs, were being punished for their parents' sins. Like there's just some really fucked up ideology there. And like, let's not even get into the fact that like so much of all of this rhetoric talks about sin and protecting women and safety, and yet huge numbers of just this year, huge numbers of religious leaders in these, in these high control religions are being exposed, arrested, and convicted for like sexual assault, child pornography, child sexual assault, like pedophilia. It's a huge amount, and like yet they raise generations of people to believe that these quote unquote good Christian, clean cut guys in suits and ties were the safe people, when really like some of the worst, most horrific abuses and cover-ups have happened. We know this in the Catholic Church. It's also true in a lot of other Christian sects. And so when there's all this profiling that's being done on immigrants, and I know I'm going off here, but on immigrants and trans people, like if you're really going to go by, okay, one immigrant committed, or a handful of immigrants, or maybe even more than a handful of immigrants, but like less than 1% of undocumented people committed some violent crimes. You and I are not arguing that anyone who commits a violent crime should be locked up or shouldn't be allowed here. We've never said we want them free.
Right. Right.
We care about our safety too.
Crime is
But if
crime.
you go by profiling, white Christian men should just not be allowed to roam free because they
I
have
mean,
committed the majority, like a vast majority of sexual crimes and violent crimes. So, and we would never say that because there's some good ones. Like it's never about profiling people. And I think that's where it keeps coming up for me, is like, why do you think saying someone's a good Christian is a signal of safety? To me, I'm like, well,
Oh,
that's
that's the
layered. I'm gonna have to
biggest
back
red
up
flag.
and look
Oh yeah.
deeper there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I wouldn't, yeah, well, of course, I would stand in any room with a trans person way before I would stand in any in a room with any Christian nationalist. Like, hard pass,
Well,
hard
yeah,
pass
because
for me.
by their logic, the numbers are way higher. So like their own logic chokes them on that. Okay, sorry, I went
So
off
what
there,
else is
but
new?
like this book, the Separation of Church and Hate, a sane
Mm.
person's guide to taking back the Bible from fundamentalists, fascists, and flock fleecing frauds. Love the
I
alliteration
love
there.
John Fuselier. He's so good.
I know.
Fugelsang. I don't know how to say it.
I think what Fuseling, I don't know, what struck me is how
Fugelsang.
clearly he talks about it. I really relate to this, and I think you do too. The Christianity we grew up with, which is love, forgiveness, service, welcoming the stranger, self-reflection, right? That version just doesn't get the spotlight because fear is louder. Like religion is being weaponized to keep people in fear because that's much easier to control.
Yeah, I mean, if it bleeds, it leads. Again, though, I mean, just speaking from my own personal example, like I sometimes think, like I, I don't know if I want to say I sometimes envy that you grew up in a church or in a family where, from the way you tell your story and or the way Sherry talks about it, where she didn't see both sides of the coin, right? Like you say we grew up with welcome the stranger, love, forgiveness, service. Sure, yes. But then what I also grew up with was watching that, and I've said this on the pod before, but watching my grandparents go to church in matching outfits, 4:30 mass every Saturday, sitting in the same damn pew, and paragons of the community, and then coming home and using the n-word and talking about everybody and everything else. And that's when, even as a young kid, I remember thinking to myself, not using this language, but like, what the fuck? Like, how is this even? I don't understand who those two people are that are sitting at church that then come home and do all literally everything opposite. So I would argue that I'm not sure everybody did grow up that
No,
way. You know
I
what I
don't think
mean?
I would never say that everyone
No,
did.
no, no, I know.
Not at
But my
all.
point is, like, I envy that you didn't have that experience,
I mean,
right?
I did and I didn't. It was around me. There was a lot of really good people around me. No one's perfect at
Sure,
all.
sure.
And I remember thinking, not even about the politics part, but like just in the way, in the resources of my parents' generation and ours of like not having a ton of awareness of mental health, right? So like to say you have faith, but then to struggle with so much anxiety, I remember being like,
Mm,
where's your faith? Oh, like being a little
right,
like, I'm
right,
curious
right,
about
right.
this. This doesn't make sense. And I mean, my dad's parents were just so humble and so generous. It's really hard. Like I'm sure if I looked, I could find something, right? With my mom's dad, I mean, I think he really felt like he was a good person and like he really tried to be a good person, like, and yet he had his, I mean, he's from Philly, like he had his prejudices and stuff. And as
Right.
I grew up, I could see even my parents, as good at Catholics as they were, you said earlier something about annulment and divorce. Like I remember them kind of rolling their eyes saying like, well, they got an annulment because they could afford it. So like they
Oh
weren't
yeah.
pretending, the Catholic Church didn't have its ridiculous hypocrisies. They weren't, and my mom's aunt, my grandfather's sister, like she's pre-Vatican too, like that kind of,
Wow. Yeah,
really
yeah.
difficult. And so I grew up with honesty around that too, which I appreciate so much. Cause like as much as, my mom and I might not agree on politics, like we can talk about this stuff. We can talk about the hypocrisies and the things like, I mean, my mom was just, she's such a smart, strong leader. And like she was a sorry, a lector, right? So
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I love the sound of her voice reading those readings. She was hugely involved, right? So like, and my sister has beautifully stepped into roles like that. She runs the youth group, and I've never seen such a beautifully engaged group of young people as the kids that got to be, and my nieces and nephews included, got to be part of that. They did a lot of mission trips. And so I think it's very possible for me to appreciate and celebrate that and see people trying their best to live up to that. And then acknowledge at the same time, like, you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Some people just really want to stay in it and continue to fight for a role for women. And I used to be like, nope, but I think you and I have talked about that's like also the problem with a lot of groups. Like, you can either walk away and say, if it's not exactly like me in every category, then I can't be there, or here's the parts I'm going to stay with and fight for. And I think more than ever, I'm starting to appreciate the people that stay within these broken systems and say, okay, let's just stick to like this message of feeding and housing and providing safe shelter for the poor. Let's, if like the Pope just said, how do you say you're pro-life if you're not, respecting the life of another human being? If
Yeah.
you're, so I'm grappling with all of it too.
Yeah.
Right. Like, as any of us are, it's like, it is so easy to criticize. There's just a lot of justification in it. And I do daily. I feel so much frustration and pain over it. And then I'm also like, okay, there's a lot of people who are totally walking that talk, and they might be the people that, get louder, and hopefully people come to their senses. I don't know. That's maybe a pipe dream.
Well, so let's go back to the fear aspect of this, because I mean, when it comes right down to it, bottom line, the fear is the thing that drives all of this. The Jesus, I just always think to myself, like, and there's plenty of art done like about this. Jesus would be picked up by ICE right now. He was a
Mm-hmm.
brown man who believed in the power of community. He would be standing with the people on the margins, like I said earlier. He tipped over the tables in the temple. Like, he is literally everything that they fight against, that they are making us, or trying, I'm sorry, let me put it a different way, that they are making their followers fearful of. It
Mm-hmm.
is pure insanity.
I mean, what it is it's weaponizing something very personal, and
Yeah.
it's weaponizing identity for control. And I really feel deeply like when I read Tia Leving's book, and I hear her now, and I follow her now, and I think she's like, she came through the trad wife movement, like, and found her people. And she's like, if those people were super judgmental and had written me off, I don't think I would have made it out. She still
Mm-hmm.
had her very pious feelings about the world, and like she had been very brainwashed to think like everyone else is the devil. And I've heard senators say, like, you've got to understand, some of these newer senators who are extreme
Right.
nationalists, they really truly believe they're fighting demons with anyone who doesn't think similarly. So if we treat them that way back, we get nowhere. But if
Yeah.
we start to really understand that, like, that takes time, and I'm not saying we're going to deprogram them, and they're like, so many of these people have an even closer relationship with God now, whether they're Christian or haven't, like, so
Yeah.
many. And because this isn't just Christians who are like falling under it, which is fascinating too. I mean, it mostly is, but it's so watching like people have to disentangle, but like not lose themselves in the process, but say,
Mm.
hey, this doesn't feel right. This doesn't feel good in my body. This doesn't feel good with people I love. This doesn't feel good with my neighbors. That takes time, and it takes a lot of patience on everyone's part. It takes forgiveness, and it's messy.
Yeah. No, I mean, yeah, that absolutely makes sense. What else do you want to touch on with these two books? Anything?
Okay. I think the other thing I just wanted to say about going back to the bomber one is, I think it reminds me why the wall between church and state matters so much. Um, because I think, like, if we like something Monty Mater says a lot, it's like, in order to have freedom of religion, we need freedom from religion.
Yeah.
And I think this propaganda that people who aren't Christian are the devil is just so dumb, but also so dangerous.
Yes.
That anybody, like, and that like there's a war on Christmas is such propaganda when people were saying happy holidays. You can say Merry Christmas. People can say Merry Christmas to you. Nobody made that against the law.
Right.
And you feeling like it's a war on your faith that other people don't celebrate it is so fragile and snowflakey. And this whole branding of, you know, the left or the like the non-Christians being snowflakey or demonic is so silly. Like it's so ridiculous. It's like, how do you not make room for the fact that someone doesn't celebrate that holiday, but they're not at all coming for your ability to celebrate it? So I think that separation is really important, that we have laws that protect everybody's identity, as long as that identity isn't doing harm to other people, it should be protected. And that is like, that just seems so simple to me. Otherwise everything is about control. It feels like we are in a war with people who want everyone to like look and feel and act the same.
Well, and I think there's once again, the irony of all this is in what they are doing, they actually are harming others. That's it's a version of faith and freedom where everybody gets to do them. You do you is the one that protects everyone. You made me think we picked a great song, which we'll get to in a second, but we should have picked War on Christmas from the Stephen Colbert Christmas special.
Forgot about that. My God.
Shout
I
out
mean,
to
here's the
Stephen
thing,
Colbert.
like, I think like being a person of any faith takes a lot of grit and gut these days. I think we do live in
Yeah.
a weird, I don't even want to say secular because that word's so misunderstood now, but we live in such a numbed out, techie AI, really weird world. Like right before we hit record, we're like, what is real life anymore? Like this is all so bizarre. So to have like a practice of faith, Beth, my good friend Beth, who we went to a Shabbat service of our another friend of mine, Kim, who like was dropping an album that she does for children in like a Reformed Jewish temple, and this was like a couple years ago, and she brought that up yesterday because we grew up Catholic, and because even though our parents raised us with a lot of kindness and a lot of good sense, like there was still all the messages of hell, right? And
Oh
sin and
yeah.
all that and shame and all that stuff. And we were just so amazed in the reform in like all the things we were looking through. And this was a couple years ago because it was not long after October 7th. And there
Mm,
was actually people outside that were making them feel less safe when they were coming out.
mm.
And on both sides, that's been really fraught. But it was so beautiful inside. There was just such a message of welcome and peace and nonviolence and like forgiveness. It was just this really beautiful thing, and we were like, how cool that people show up. This isn't our faith tradition, although there was a lot about it that was so beautiful, and they do overlap. People don't like to
Oh yeah.
think about like all these religions have a lot of overlapping
Yep.
sentiments, but like how beautiful it is that anybody shows up at any age, these young people especially, to practice their faith. I don't want any of our message to say we are anti that.
No,
That is
God no.
like faith and freedom were never meant to cancel each other out, ever. They are both worth fighting for. They are not the same.
No.
I
No.
mean, definitely you need the freedom to practice your faith, but freedom is in its own own sense of being is really, really important right now. And I took it for granted my whole life until lately.
I mean, we all did. There's no question. I never in a million years did I think we would be in the position we are in right now. And again, I mean, no, I want to reiterate that. Kari and I are definitely women of faith. There's no question. We are spiritual. We are deeply faithful. No question. That being said, um, this is as you just said, this is no longer abstract anymore, right? This is affecting everyday lives. How it's about being able to live, how we live. Do we believe? Do we not believe? I'm just a big believer in you do you. That is my whole basis of life. Like, to your point, if it is not affecting me, it is none of my goddamn business. I That is the part that I do not understand. Why uh why anyone thinks they get to tell any other human being who to love, how to believe, how to practice,
What to do with your body.
what to do with your
Yeah.
body. Like, just stay in your own space. It's so crazy.
Yes. That's why
So
this
crazy.
conversation matters. And I think I've said this to you before, but I remember trying to explain to my kids when they were asking about different religions. And I always had issues with like the one true church or the one true, like this is the way, and like
Mm-hmm.
no other way is the way. Right. And said, here's the thing. And I always said Chicago for some reason, which is so sweet because Chicago's on our hearts right now. It should be on
Yeah.
everyone's. Was there's many ways to get to Chicago. You could take a plane, you could fly first class, you could get a middle seat, you could take a train, you could drive, you could ride a bike, you could walk without shoes. Like, there are many, many ways you'll get there. But you'll still get there. And some ways are way harder. Some ways, might bypass a few things about the journey that maybe could have taught you more. But if you don't harm anyone on the way, you're all going to get there. So like, who's to say one way is better than the other? And that's just kind of how I've always seen it. Like,
Yeah.
who has, like, you're not less of a Christian or less of a whatever, fill in the blank, if you question that. That's one thing I totally admire about Judaism. Like, to be Jewish is to question. That is part of
Right.
the process. You're supposed to challenge it. That's how you go deeper in your faith. This idea that you don't question it, which we're seeing a
Mm.
lot of in a lot of places right now with ideology, and it's very scary. This idea that you don't question it, or if you do, you're anti blah, blah, blah.
Right.
Is so dangerous because you're teaching people to not think, and then they won't
Mm.
feel, and then they won't have any faith at all. They'll just have blind loyalty.
Mm. So we'll close with our song today, which is Bob Marley, One Love, One Heart. Let's get together and feel all right. And Bob Marley, he did not shy away from the hard truths either. So Kari and I are going to invite you to join us together to fight this holy Armageddon so that when the man, if you believe that, comes, there will be no gloom, no doom.
I love that line so much. There will be no doom. So if this stirred
Uh,
something in you, please share it with someone else. Clearly, and thank you for hanging in there with us. I can go all over the map in this because I feel so deeply. Lisa can too. We can hang with each other on that. And if you hung with us, thank you.
yes.
There's so much more we could have said, and we're feeling, and we probably will be continuing. This will be continue to be an area we're paying attention to and feeling a lot around. And we would love to hear from you and how this is going for you, even if you disagree with us. We welcome that.
Thanks, everyone. We'll be back next week with more.
Bye.